Hi, my name is Sheila Hare and I teach at Quinnipiac University School of Law, and I wanted to thank you all for being here today. We were told just before we went live that we had 287 people on, and that number may grow. So we're very excited about the support. I just wanted to give some shout outs and thank yous to the Connecticut Bar Foundation, the Connecticut Bar Fellows, the CBA, the Connecticut Association for supporting this, and of course, Quinnipiac University School of Law. But I wanted to give a special shout out to the Underground, and you're going to hear more about them. But they have offered two speakers here today, Anne Marie and Teresa, who are both co-founders of the Underground. And again, you'll hear more about them, but thanks to them for sponsoring this event. And my only job today is to introduce our incredible moderator. She is our third-year law student, Cynthia Lill. She goes by Cindy. And just the other night, it was totally amusing to me. Somebody asked me or said to her, "You're a professor at Quinnipiac, right?" No, she's a third-year law student, but I think that sort of gives you a sense of how much passion she has for this issue and how deeply committed to this issue she is. She's made sure that she's seen this issue from as many sides as she can. She has volunteered as an intern at the prosecutor's office, the state's attorney's office in Connecticut, at the public defender's office, and she's also worked for victims' rights advocate groups. And she actually helped Quinnipiac train some public defenders in Connecticut around this issue, how to spot victims as they come through the system. And a lot of public defenders after that training said, we had no idea. We may have seen some folks come through years ago and just never realized that the people we're defending are trafficking. So anyway, goes without saying, I think that we wouldn't be here today without Cindy. And thanks to her, Quinnipiac's University School of Law Civil Justice Clinic has put forward this legislation around vacature. She'll talk a little more about it, but remember, it allows trafficking victims to vacate or set aside their convictions if they can show that the convictions resulted from trafficking. So without further ado, thank you, Cindy, and thanks to all our panelists.
Thank you, Sheila, and thank you everyone for being here. It is so great to see all of you here to listen to what we have to say today. So this is the second event in our Understanding Human Trafficking series, but we are far from done. Our last event focused specifically on vacature, and I want to be clear about what we're talking about when we say vacature. So we are advocating for common sense legislation that would allow people to set aside their criminal convictions beyond prostitution convictions if they can show that they are being trafficked or have been trafficked. But that isn't the only piece of the puzzle. We think that vacature is just common sense legislation, and we have the support of so many of you. We have the support of the chief state's attorneys, the Office of the Public Defenders, nearly every victims' rights organization in the state, as well as many legislators and many of you who are here today. After this legislative session, we want to start to explore some of the more difficult topics that arise when we talk about the solution to stopping trafficking. Should we be criminalizing buyers more harshly? Should we decriminalize prostitution? In DC, there were even failed efforts to go so far as to legalize prostitution. And we want to explore, is that something we should even be considering in Connecticut? There's a lot of different models and proposals out there nationally, and they're incredibly tough issues that we might want to explore further down the line in this series. We also have a panel coming up on child marriage that will be taking place on Friday, April 23rd at the same 12 to 2 o'clock time. So make sure you keep an eye on about that. So as I mentioned before, this is the second event in our series. We were thrilled to see the support of over 250 registrants at the last panel. Today we had over 280. So again, that last panel focused on vacature specifically. So we really encourage you to check that out on the Connecticut Bar Foundation website. And I can put my email in the chat to send it along to anyone if they want to reach out to me. So that last panel is why we're here today. There are so many players who are working towards the expansion of vacature, but we really wanted to bring out the most important voices in this conversation, which are the voices of survivors. We hope today will show you why this legislation is so desperately needed and why all of this work and your support is so important. We have 2 hours for this panel today, but our survivors have a lot of amazing things to say, so we might go over time. We're going to start off this panel by giving you a bit of background on vacature both here in Connecticut and New York. After about 20 minutes of discussion of the law, we're going to give our survivors center stage. We're so lucky to be here to listen to what they have to say, because at the end of the day, their opinions are the ones that really matter. They are the reason why we're here doing the work that we do. So we're going to try to reserve the last 30 minutes for Q&A, but I just want to give everyone a heads up that we might not get to every question. We're really here today to hear from Teresa and Sharifa. So we're going to take the time to let them share their stories. We may also answer a couple of questions via the chat while the panel is going on, so please feel free to drop them in at any time. I'm going to give everyone a brief introduction, but they all have bios on the Connecticut Bar Foundation website, so please go check those out. We have such an incredible group of women here today, so you really should go read their bios. Today we have Anne-Marie Boulay from the Underground, and honestly, it's very hard to put into words how amazing Anne-Marie is. I think it's going to be clear to all of you today how deeply she cares about these issues and how amazing she is at working with survivors. She is truly an advocate in every sense of the word, and we really want to thank her for the hours that she spent with us planning for this panel. She truly has a gift for opening people's eyes and opening their hearts to this issue. One of the things that we struggle with, and I know many people struggle with, and we have learned a lot about, is how to include the voices of trafficking survivors in a way that elevates their voices. We want to honor their voices without re-traumatizing them. And Anne-Marie has taught us a great deal about how to appropriately do that, and she's truly so thoughtful, and we owe her the utmost thanks, and we are so lucky to have you here today. We feel equally blessed to have Lee here today. Lee came on at the very last minute, and we are so grateful that Sharifa gave her a little push to speak today. Lee is a supervising attorney with the Legal Aid Society in New York City. In 2013, she founded Legal Aid Exploitation Intervention Project, where one of the many amazing things she does is advocate for trafficking survivors like Sharifa. Lee was such a big part of Sharifa's story, so we're very grateful that Sharifa, who we will introduce in a minute, convinced her to join us today. We also have Representative Jillian Gilchrist, who is the champion of our bill. People kept telling us that we needed this champion. I think someone used the word rabbi for our bill. We really needed someone to push this forward, and we couldn't have found a better one than Jillian. We're so thankful for all her efforts around human trafficking and for her time here today. Now, to the most important people, we also have Teresa here today, who absolutely blew me away at the last panel. She is really the reason why we're having this conversation today. At the end of our last panel, Teresa left us with such a beautiful message of the freedom that she experienced after being granted 44 pardons. Her story made us realize that we really need to bring forward her voice and the voices of others who have gone through a similar situation. So thank you, Teresa, for being here today. And last, but certainly not any means least, we have Sharifa here with us. Sharifa is from New York, and she is not only an EMT who's been working through this pandemic, but she works with survivors in New York as an advisory board member of the Exploitation Intervention Project. We only just met Sharifa, but we're so excited that she's here with us today. From our conversations, I know she's an amazing advocate for survivors who are going through the vacatur process, and we're especially grateful because sharing her story about trafficking is a bit new to her. So welcome, Sharifa. It is truly an honor to have you here. So thank you to all our panelists.
Thank you.
I want to start off by giving you all a little bit of context about why we're having this conversation, why we started advocating for vacatur. As a member of the Civil Justice Clinic, we had represented 3 survivors of trafficking who all struggled as a result of their criminal convictions that they had obtained while they were a victim of trafficking. Trying to find a remedy to help them move on from their victimization, we stumbled across the vacatur statute, which again is criminal conviction relief for survivors of trafficking, but it's limited to prostitution convictions. So this statute looked great. It's specific for trafficking victims, but none of our clients had prostitution convictions, so they couldn't use the statute. Each had a very compelling story about how their convictions were tied to their trafficking, but they didn't have a venue for anyone to listen. Now, our clients were not the only ones who had this issue, as you will hear today. In fact, the vacatur law in Connecticut has been on the books since 2013, and it's only been used by one survivor who used it to vacate her prostitution convictions. So there's a lot of work to be done. But inspired by this, we started to advocate for an expansion to our vacatur laws. And today you will have the privilege of hearing from 2 survivors, Teresa and Sharifa, why we so desperately need to enact this change in our state. However, this is only 2 of the stories. Unfortunately, Teresa and Sharifa and our three victims who we work with in the clinic aren't the only ones who need this relief. There are many victims of both labor and sex trafficking who would benefit from this change in legislation. And with that, thank you, everyone. I'm going to hand it over to Lee and then Jillian to give you a little bit of context about vacatur in New York and Connecticut, respectively.
Good afternoon, everyone, and thank you so much for joining us. And thank you, Cynthia, for that gracious introduction. So as she said, I am a supervising attorney with New York City's Legal Aid Society, and we are the primary public defender in New York City. And about 8 years ago, I was part of a team that created the Exploitation Intervention Project. And the original work that we anticipated was the representation of legal aid's clients arrested for prostitution offenses. As we began this representation, we started learning more about trafficking and other types of exploitation that our clients experienced. And so we began to expand the project to include the representation of trafficked individuals arrested on other crimes. A big part of the work that we do is also vacature motions for trafficking survivors. In 2010, New York was the first state to enact a law that allowed trafficking victims to vacate and dismiss and then seal the records of prostitution convictions that resulted from their trafficking experience. And this was revolutionary and has helped, in New York, has helped many people vacate sometimes extensive criminal records, and has helped people move on from their trafficking experience. But as I indicated earlier, as we learned about the experiences that individuals have when they're trafficked, we learned that most trafficking victims are forced to engage in behavior that leads to other types of convictions. And it's really a very wide range of types of things. Drug possession, even drug sale, theft offenses, assault, a very wide array of types of convictions. And the New York law does not allow us to formally petition to vacate those types of convictions. So we found that our clients were being left with an incomplete remedy for convictions that were tied to their trafficking. So New York State, there is a bill pending in New York now sorry, to slow down, talking too fast. There is a bill pending in New York now that would extend vacature to all types of crimes. So that a trafficking survivor would be entitled to file a motion to request a court to make a legal determination that this conviction was related or as a result of their trafficking, and make a determination as to whether that case should be dismissed and sealed. So about 7 years ago, Sharifa and I met because she was arrested for prostitution. And so I was assigned to her case as part of the project. And as I reviewed the papers from her case, I saw that like over 10 years prior, she had had a series of arrests over about a 4-year period for prostitution, and then one arrest in the midst of that for criminal possession of a controlled substance as a misdemeanor. And based on what I had learned about people's trafficking experience, I thought it was possible that Sharifa had been trafficked. So we got to know each other, establish a relationship and a relationship of confidence. And I began talking to Sharifa about her experience, and that those prostitution convictions were related to her trafficking. So we filed a motion on her behalf. It's a lot of hard work. It's not an easy process for survivors to work on, because I think almost every client that I've worked with has told me that these are memories that they are trying not, they've consciously pushed away. And now I'm in a room with them asking them to bring them all back so we can do the motion. So I don't want anyone to think that this is an easy process. It's not. It requires a lot of commitment to the process. So we filed a motion. All of Sharifa's convictions were in Manhattan. We filed a motion. I did include the possession of a controlled substance charge because it was so intricately related to her trafficking. It just felt unfair to me that she wouldn't be able to get that vacated. So we had a meeting with the prosecutor. Sharifa came and, she was questioned about her trafficking experience. She spoke she was really brave and shared her experience. And then in the end, the prosecutor, this individual prosecutor, decided that in the interest of justice, they would agree to the vacature of they were agreeing to the vacature of the prostitution convictions, which came within New York statute, but they also, in the interest of justice, agreed to vacate her criminal possession of a controlled substance conviction. But they very specifically told us that it was in the interest of justice. And I took a note because I wanted to let you know specifically what they said, but that they were wanted to make sure that the court knew that they were not consenting based on an expanded interpretation of the statute, and that the statute very specifically only applies to prostitution convictions, and that their consent in this individual case did not create a new policy or precedent. So they wanted to make sure that the law was still very narrowly interpreted in case in a future instance they didn't think the interest of justice would dictate or allow them to consent to vacature in another type of case. So what concerns me about that, so that's great for Sharifa, right? Sharifa gets all of her trafficking related convictions vacated, and it really changed her life. But what concerns me about that is that in another county, and I literally have had this experience in another county, that prosecutor's office won't even consider the interest of justice in a case that's, tied to someone's trafficking. And they will even recognize that a conviction is, another type of conviction is tied to the trafficking, but they will say the statute doesn't cover it. We're not going to consent. We will object. So it's hard to see that type of justice being meted out, in which the justice that someone receives depends on the county in which their conviction takes place, and the attitudes of the prosecutor in that county. So we need to have a statewide law that allows trafficking survivors to move to vacate any conviction that's a result of their trafficking, so that they can receive the remedy and the justice that they deserve. Thank you.
Thank you, Lee. Jillian, would you mind sharing with us a bit about Connecticut's law?
Sure, thank you so much. And thank you for putting this on and having the voices of victims shared. So as you were just hearing, there are many important reasons why we need a policy like this. And so we are looking in Connecticut to pass a law that would allow for vacature of all trafficking related charges, not just the traditional prostitution, but drug-related charges. And I'd like to see us also include trafficking itself, because we know that oftentimes a victim of human trafficking, that their trafficker will force them to solicit other women or men to participate in this crime. So in 2016, actually, Connecticut had passed a law that was, I'm so sorry. The joys of working from home. I'm so sorry, someone came to the door and the dog freaked out. So in 2016, I'm gonna move rooms, you're gonna see me travel. In 2016, we actually passed a policy that was meant to address this issue, but the policy was drafted incorrectly. And so this actually is an attempt to go back and right the wrongs of our past to ensure that victims of human trafficking have this vacature component. Another thing that might come up and we might discuss in Connecticut is why not use the Board of Pardon and Parole, because that is a method for folks to be able to get charges removed. But when we're talking about this crime and what you were just hearing, that this is not an easy process for a survivor to understand that what they've experienced is victimization. There's oftentimes a lot of shame and blame that goes into this. And so when we know that a victim of human trafficking has gone through the long process of being able to understand and come to terms with their victimization, we certainly don't want them to have to go before a board and apologize for their behavior. And that is the role of the Board of Pardon and Parole. There is no apology in this. It is accepting that an individual was victimized and that the crimes that they participated in were a result of that victimization. And so we are moving forward in Connecticut, trying to get this bill passed so that we could have all charges included under our vacature policy. The final piece I'll say is that at the end of the day, the court does have discretion. And so I think that's an element that helps when having this conversation. But I apologize for the dog barking. I thank you for having this event today, and I look forward to hearing from our amazing survivors. Thank you.
Thank you so much. And just the joys of working from home. And I just want to kind of make another point with what Jillian was talking about, where if these things were known at the time of sentencing, at the time of charging, the outcome for these people would have been totally different. And we had a question, which I think Lee could answer, that I want to address right now. Somebody asked whether a person can ask for vacatur while they're serving a sentence, or do they have to wait until their sentence is complete?
I would say there's a two-part answer to that. I think there's no bar to someone moving to vacate a conviction while they're serving their sentence. As a practical matter, in New York State, prostitution convictions don't result in jail time, so that's never been an issue. But if the law were to expand and would include felonies that might result in jail sentences, I don't think there would be any bar. But to Cindy's point, and the work that my team and I do now is to try to do our best to ensure that a trafficking victim is not convicted and sentenced on a case that is the result of their trafficking. And that's, educating prosecutors and police, trafficking victims and survivors that are in our system is crucial to making sure that, the injustice that trafficking victims have experienced over the years does not go forward.
And Cindy, if I could just jump in, I had the benefit of looking at the statute again, which some of our panelists probably didn't have the ability to do while being on. And the Connecticut statute talks about at any time after a conviction is entered. But later on in the statute, it does say may dismiss the conviction and any charges. So there is a little bit of a question in terms of that, but I think it's very important to emphasize, as Lee just did, that victims are really going through the system unidentified. And so this addresses it at the back end, but it would be, hopefully we could argue that as people are serving their convictions, that if this information is brought to prosecutors, they would be open to changing their minds, just I think as the example Lee gave. And I think that's why there is so much prosecutorial support for this, because we have heard from prosecutors who say, wow, this completely changes all of my decisions to charge, to bring this to a trial, even in sentencing. Had we known this information, our complete process of deciding how to deal with this case would have been different. So I hope equitably there could be some argument there. Thanks for that question.
Yes, thank you. And thank you, Sheila. Thank you, Lee. And thank you, Jillian. Before we get into the questions, I'm going to pass the mic to Anne Marie just to add a few words.
Well, good afternoon, everyone. I first want to say how grateful we are that Quinnipiac University is the venue for this conversation. I want to thank Sheila, Cynthia, Representative Gilchrist, Lee, and of course, these two lovely ladies who are with us today, and all of you. The whole point of today's conversation with these two women is to hear their lived experience, right? So that this audience can understand from their perspective of what they experienced, why this is important to pass. The Underground, whenever we ask survivor leaders to speak, we're doing that so that we can learn from them, so that we can be informed by them. And what you're about to hear is a great privilege and an honor to listen to them. And they're being brave. And they're also, by their voices, we pray, will be change agents for the state, right? Like if they don't motivate you, I don't know who will. And so it really is a great privilege and honor to hear from them. And we're really looking to provide you with a backdrop that's significant enough so that you can step in their shoes for a moment and understand just how important this bill is. I can't reemphasize that enough. And it means everything in their freedom, in their ability to be liberated from previous trafficking experiences. So it's a real pleasure to have them both. Teresa's been part of the underground for 8 years. And Sharifa is a lovely lady. So really appreciate you both being here. You're going to do a great job. And we're right here to support you. Thank you so much for being here.
Thank you, Anne Marie. We're so blessed to have all of you here, especially you, Teresa and Sharifa. So many of us encounter trafficking survivors when they're adults, years after that they have self-identified and started to rebuild their lives. And as a result, it's easy to miss the fact that many survivors were trafficked as children from a very young age. And to begin to understand their stories, we must understand how they carry this victimization into adulthood. Teresa and Sharifa, would each of you mind sharing a little bit about your story? We could start with you, Teresa, if you're comfortable.
Hello, everyone. My name is Teresa Rosine. I'm honored to be here today. All of the people that are the women that are talking here are warriors, and because of you, 179 people, or whatever it is, I don't have my glasses, are going to leave here today knowing things that they never would have even guessed. So as a child, I was trafficked by my mother, somewhere between probably 6 until I was 12 years old. And I came up with I didn't have the understanding that I was a survivor. I didn't know that. I thought I was a 6 to 12-year-old prostitute. And I was doing these things because I needed to pay my way. If you don't pay, you can't stay. And on some level, it was that. And then there was on the other level, it was my job to take care of my mother. She had a drug addiction, and I was the solution. And when I did these things, she wasn't sick anymore. Now, years later, I spent the next 4 years, until I was about 16, 17 years old, in psychiatric hospitals. I'd gone to a couple foster homes, just another place where I was re-victimized over and over. And then after those foster homes, I was not fit to go to school. I was not able to understand that I was not a prostitute. Up until 8 years ago, I thought that's who I was. And, Anne Marie has worked with me. She is my hero. She helped me understand that I wasn't a prostitute, and that my words were the most powerful words I was going to hear. So if I say I'm a prostitute, that's what I am. If I say I'm a survivor, I am a survivor indeed. And today I'm a survivor. I won't go on too much longer. It's kind of like this. I spent 3 years in the pardon process. And there were many times I said, that's it, I'm done. And my husband in the background kept the process moving along. It took 3 years for me or for my dream team, because there was a lot of people that got me to that place. And I know without a doubt, I would not have survived that process. So when we talk about the process of pardon and paroles, it's a nightmare. First of all, it's like one of the requirements was I needed to get a letter from a probation officer in 1993 saying that they were the disposition of that violation of probation. In the process of looking for that, he had already died. Well, now I had to get the supervisor. And the supervisor looked at me like I was absolutely insane. And why was I insane? Because guess what? Everything they needed to know about my criminal history, they had, I'm sorry, I got stuck there. That came just with a few minutes of manpower. They would find out that the last conviction that I had was in 2008. And I finished that sentence. And if you told me back then that that was going to be the last time I was going to see a prison cell, I would have been like, you. And Anne Marie had told me years ago, several years ago, before I started, why don't you just start? And I'm glad I did start, because I had many people that walked with me through this process. I remember standing there in front of the parole boards next to sex offenders, violent criminals, and they're asking for the same thing that I'm asking for. So you know what? If you can consider someone who's got, for example, I wasn't a violent offender. I never hurt anybody. Technically, it's kind of like this. The crimes that were done were all related to being trafficking, from possession, criminal trespassing, um, uh, promoting in prostitution. For example, I would fill up my car. I was the only one who can legally drive, and I drop off these women at different places where they were going to go and work. Technically, that is in fact promoting prostitution. Okay. And so there is a lot of things that are connected to this issue than just a simple prostitution conviction. And I think it's really important that we really look into that, because it's easy to see the prostitute standing outside at the red light, or the prostitute who's coming out of that motel on a short stay, a 3-hour short stay. What are you doing in 3 hours? Nobody's there taking a nap or watching a basketball game. They're there for the sole purpose of a transaction. The woman is for sale and he is buying it. That simple. So there's a lot of, and when we talk about legalizing prostitution, I have one sentence to this. So what you're asking for is to legalize, okay, and promote the sex trafficking of every man, woman, and child. Because that's what we're going to do. When we legalize this, that's what we're saying. That it's legal to sell a human being, and that's just unacceptable for me.
Thank
So
you.
I'm sorry. I didn't
No,
mean to
it's
interrupt.
okay. Thank you for that, Teresa. And we're going to have you hit on a couple of points there that we'll definitely have a bit more time to explore later down the road. But I really thank you for sharing all of that with us today. Sharifa, would you mind sharing a little bit about your story, about your background, and where you've come from? Uh-oh, I hope we haven't lost Sharifa.
Uh-oh. Wait
Sharifa,
a second. I'm sorry. I am so sorry. Excuse me.
okay. I was just asking if you'd mind sharing with us a little bit about your background and why you're here today.
Okay. Hi, thank you for having me. Well, I'm a survivor, as you know. And I was trafficked way before I encountered the criminal justice system. I was like 12, 13 years old. And again, like Teresa, I didn't even know I was a victim until about like 8 years ago when I met Lee. And I certainly didn't know there was any relief. I thought it was going to be this my whole life. And being a being trafficked and going through the system, um I think it was the worst part for me, being not looked at as a human being, not, had someone had asked me, can we help you? Why are you doing this? Or identified me as a victim, I would have, my life probably would have been totally different. And another bad part of it is, having a record for prostitution, being a victim of a crime, and you know, um, going to the cops isn't an option because they, look at you, prostitutes. I was raped, and they're like, oh, what was it, your pimp? Like no sympathy, no nothing. And at that time, cops were totally dirty. They would make you do sexual favors and then take you to jail. So, not only was I taught to lie and not, because of my age, but, not to trust and stuff like that. They were showing me they couldn't be trusted. So, it's continually being victimized. And I'm very grateful for Lee, to, yeah, if I had never met her, my life would not be where it is right now. And I don't know, I'm just a little nervous, excuse me.
You're doing
Um,
great.
yeah, so, it's very important, for these, right down to law enforcement, to be trauma informed, to, ask questions, the public defenders, right up to the judges, need to stop and, ask questions and, not criminalize someone that's a victim because, of course, this is something that was done to me. Not that I went out and chose to do, and I had several traffickers. So it's kind of rough. So it's like the powers that be, there's no help. So I'm very glad that there is a remedy, although not a perfect one, but that's about progress and expanding the law. And I'm grateful for panels like these and caring people that are willing to stand by us, and advocate and push for this. It's very important. It's life changing, and it is not an easy process. As someone had pointed out, talking about trauma, so services are very important. I was able to have a counselor through the process, the vacatur process. And I still actually talk to someone today because it's not something that goes away, and the law needs to see that and recognize that, and not do the half at, excuse my language, to not the complete relief, like if you have other um convictions like drug possession or assault, you know what I'm saying? Because again, the us as a big, well, I'm a survivor now, but as victims, it's not a choice, and some of us, don't know how to speak up or even know that we're victims. So it's important for, authorities, criminal system, whatever, to, take time to be educated. And I guess this is a good step, so you can realize that, hey, this is how we can approach this person. Let's offer this person some help, and understand, and perhaps change a life. So I'm grateful.
Thank you
And I guess that's about it.
so much, Sharifa and Teresa. We're so thankful that you two are here sharing this with us. It's truly a privilege and an honor to have both of you here. And what I'm hearing loud and clear from the both of you is that this isn't a choice, right? Teresa, you mentioned that you were 6 years old, and Sharifa, you were a teenager. What we want the audiences to understand is you were both children. We want the audience to understand that people don't wake up one day and decide to be prostituted. They are victimized, sometimes as children, sometimes by people who are supposed to love and protect them. And understand this and recognize this because no matter what age a victim is, young or old, they're being exploited. This isn't a choice. No matter, and it's super important to be careful with the language we use, right? Because children are never prostitutes. Trafficking survivors are never prostitutes. I have still seen the word child and prostitute today used in the same sentence. And it's really important that we're careful with our language and we recognize this and we remember that this isn't a choice. Even once you reach adulthood, even if the victimization starts in adulthood, it's not a choice. And traffickers use force, fraud, and coercion to target their victims. They isolate them, manipulate them until they can ultimately control them. And part of this control is forcing victims to sell themselves, which can give rise to prostitution charges, but they also force victims to commit other crimes, which both of you kind of brought out, which can range from drug offenses, resisting arrest, and so many other convictions that can all be tied to their trafficking. In a recent survey done by National Survivor Network, over 60% of survivors interviewed had convictions for something in prostitution or drug offenses. Could each of you share a little bit about what you were arrested for, why these crimes occurred, and what you feared would happen if you didn't obey? Teresa, we could start with you.
So this is pretty much what when I was writing down when you were talking. So here are the crimes that I was pardoned for. Of course, there was a load of failure to appears, prostitution, criminal trespassing, violation of probation, failure to appear in court. Now, all of these were surrounding me through a trafficker. For example, if the police come and drugs are involved, the victim takes the drugs and the trafficker says, don't worry, I'll get you out. But you're going to go to jail, but at least if I'm out here, I can get you out. And sometimes they do get you out, but more than usually they don't. And one of the things that happens about that cycle there, so I find myself incarcerated. So I get 3 years. So right around, a couple months before my sentence ends, I start getting letters in the mail, telling me from my trafficker how much he misses me and how his life has just been terribly devastated. He couldn't write because he was so painful without me. Okay, so now we've clued into it's not trafficking. Now we're cluing into the fact that I'm starting to think I'm important. And so now a little bit of money starts coming in the mail. Okay, what happens then? So now I'm starting to believe that he loves me and he cares for me and I have value to him. So because he needs all these things, I'm the only one he can get it from. So $20 here, $20 there. So the end of my sentence comes, and now I could go in 2 ways. Number one, I can be dropped off. The counselor at the prison, a day or two before you're out, says, where would you like us to drop you off? Waterbury, New Haven, Hartford, Bridgeport. Okay, so that's all they offer. They don't offer food. They don't offer clothing. I'm standing there as the bus drives away in scrubs with DOC written on the back. And then the trafficker comes along. I can feed you. I can take care of you. You're not alone. And any progress that was made in the mindset of what happens while a person is incarcerated, in that moment, nobody else is there. And it's just me and him. And I can't eat. I'll starve to death. And so now, I have a significant mental health issue, the PTSD. I have a learning disability. I'm now homeless and without services. And there is my trafficker who's going to take very good care of me. And now the cycle is redone. Now I go to jail again. Now some of these, like a prostitution or a criminal trespassing, those I think Lee had mentioned, those are not usually charges that get you in jail until you fail to appear in court on those. And now that's a whole nother crime. And what happens when my court date comes? My trafficker says to me, listen, if you go to court, they're going to cuff you, they're going to put you away, and you'll never get out. So what do? I can't do that. So I failed to appear in court. Now another crime has been convicted. Another crime that when it comes and I'm in jail and they say, let's get her in a program. Oh, wait a minute. She's got all these failure to appears. That and the fear is that if they put me in one of these halfway houses that I'm going to leave. Why? Because I've got all those failure to appears. And of course the drugs, prostitution, criminal impersonation, because he's giving me a new name. My name isn't Teresa anymore. He's chosen what my name is to be. So when I get arrested, I give them that name because that's who I am now. Teresa's long gone. I am whoever it is that he's named me, and I'm his property. I don't get to say where, when, do I sleep, do I eat, who do I sleep with? No, 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 no. He's named me and he now owns me. So I think all of those are things that we don't want to overlook. The mindset that comes from being trafficked. It's
Thank
more than just feeling not to fulfill the part.
Thank you so much, Teresa. You hit at so many amazing points there, and just I really thank you for sharing that, because you hit so many points on what's going through your mind and with the failure to appears, especially how the trafficker can have control over that and can swoop in right at that moment and make you feel like you're not alone. I want to turn it over to Sharifa now and see, would you mind telling us a bit about what you were arrested for and why these crimes occurred in your case?
Okay. Well, like I had mentioned before, I was trafficked for years before I encountered the criminal justice system. And actually, my first arrest, I wasn't even doing anything. I was living in a high prostitution neighborhood in like a SRO, and but I was dancing in a club, so I guess I had the gear on. So I guess it was a squad. All the girls ran inside, and I was waiting for the elevator, and I got arrested for solicitation, purpose of prostitution, and that's when I met my wife-in-law. It's not even funny, but and she introduced me to my first pimp trafficker. You know what I'm saying? And then going through the system, it's, hey, let's, work for me. We'll protect you from other pimps, all this other stuff. And again, it's the same drill, with my first trafficker, he kept me in line with violence. And, at that time, I didn't serve any significant jail time. What is this?
Sorry, I think my internet just cut out there, so you could keep
Oh,
going. Sorry.
okay. Where was I? Dang it, now I forgot where I was. Where was I? I was like going through the system, I think. Anyway, yeah, so it was basically, at the time, it wasn't like, okay, you could get put away for it, but the amount of arrests, it's like you just go through the system, and, when you get in front of the judge, it's just time served, another prostitution conviction, another, you know what I'm saying? We were just going like through a revolving door, like cattle, pretty much. So it was like a occupational hazard, like I knew I was going to go to jail at least 2, 3 times a week, every week, because he had us out there on the track, on the street, like it was a regular job, you know what I'm saying, from 10 o'clock at night till 6 o'clock in the morning. And it was just horrible, you know what I'm saying? Like I don't even know how I got through it, the whole experience. And yeah, I just it's the bad part is just at that time, that's why it's so important not to just lock people up and build up their record and not care that that person might want a future one day. You know what I'm saying? And that's, goes into looking at, feeling like you're garbage, like there's, no one's going to help you. Not to mention cops are as dirty as all get out. You know what I'm saying? So I didn't even have to be taught to not trust them, because, it's just, and then yeah, it just was a big waste of time. And just being punished for, being on the street, a victim of the system, like from the child welfare, from my family, you know what I'm saying? The whole right down the line, it's just failed me. And I've been, being taught by the system, by the judges, by everyone else, you know what I'm saying? That, I'm the criminal, I'm the terrible one. You know what I'm saying? And that's it. They don't want to hear anything. It's just time served, you're out, and see you next week or see you the same night. You know what I'm saying? So um yeah, it's just not good, and that's just one of my traffickers. And I had another trafficker. It's terrible. Like, I can't really, I don't feel comfortable getting into all of that, you know what I'm saying? But it just went on so long, and I just felt, I could never be anything else but that, because, you can't get a good job, you can't go to school, you can't, you know, um, do anything with a criminal record. You know what I'm saying? So yeah, up until it's so funny because Teresa said it was in 2008, and it was 8 years or something since her last arrest, because it was sort of like those numbers are significant for me as well, because I'm not that young, but it's like up until a few years ago, I had no idea. I would have probably been still working, doing the same thing. You know what I'm saying? Because what else is there for me? You know what I'm saying? So my life has changed so much, and like I know it's probably sounds trite, and in terms of saying that, any my worst day, because I'm still struggling, I'm still there's a lot more that I want to do, um but my worst day this way, being clean and being free of those convictions, is just, better than my best day making $1,000. You know what I'm saying? It's like I would rather be broke, and I have my pride, and I have wonderful people in my life right now, and Leah's one of them, and the whole EIP, and just I can do this I can do anything right now. So
Thank you so much, Sharifa. We really thank you for sharing that with us. And what what I heard from both of you is that you both felt alone at many points in this process, and you both felt like you had to go back to your trafficker. You were forced to kind of go back to that. Anne Marie, would you mind speaking us to a bit about this and kind of what there is out there for survivors?
Yeah, sure. And I just, want to reiterate these two beautiful women experienced exploitation when they were children, right? They were just little ones. So we know that when somebody is violated in that way, their whole life is never the same again, to Sharifa's point, right? And even Teresa's will tell you the very same thing. And it takes years and years for recovery to occur, right? A very brave thing to think about, leaving this life that unfortunately happened to them and starting a new one, because there's so much uncertainty, and there really isn't a lot of resources. Although in Connecticut, we can see that that's changing, right? But it is essential that beyond rescue, we have a pathway of care for any survivor who's looking to leave that life and begin a new one of freedom, right? And so we need a whole system in place for them. And like the way Teresa was met by her trafficker when she got out of jail, we need to be standing in that gap and saying, listen, we've got the food, we've got the clothing, we've got the shelter, we're going to help you. When we provide that kind of support, it allows somebody who's been victimized to stop, take a rest. They don't have to think about selling themselves in order to just get a meal or whatever, right? They can rest for a minute, and then hopefully it clears a little and they start wanting to experience this new life. Like, we can do that for people in Connecticut, right? And here's some of the ways that we are. So first of all, Siri's out there, Bloom, they're doing excellent work with adult survivors. Siri has a nice program for housing. I know it doesn't serve a lot of people, but we can change that. Bloom is meeting people right on the street. As far as the underground goes, we have a mentoring program, and we're looking at affordable housing right now. because many of these folks want to live successfully as an independent person, and they need really the support of a mentor as well as affordable housing. Sorry about the puppy. We all seem to have a lot of puppies around. Lastly, we are very blessed to have two new long-term housing experience through Amira and Pat, right? They are transitional houses. You know, they model after different things, but you know, essentially they're a place for a survivor to go and heal, and there's no cost to the survivor whatsoever. These are all funded privately. We hope through the underground we'll have some of the same experiences with independent living. But everything Teresa and Sharifa have said, right? They need who when people are trying to leave that life, they really do need a village really, to stand with them and help them move from what they understood as their normal to bringing them into a new hope in a new normal, which absolutely should be theirs to have, right? Sharifa, young lady, beautiful lady, she's doing a great job. I don't know if she'll share that with you, but you know, without that vacatur process, she wouldn't have been eligible. Teresa, without her process of complete pardon so that there's nothing hanging out there, she would not have been able to experience the kind of things that she's been experiencing over the past few years. So this is critical, and we can do it as we band together in the state. So thank you. That's our husky, sorry.
Very cute puppy. Thank you so much, Anne Marie. It is so critical that we have these services because, as we both heard from Sharifa and Teresa, it's necessary. One of the things that people struggle so much to understand about trafficking is why victims don't speak out. How is it possible that victims interact with the police, with prosecutors, with judges, even their own defense attorney, and no one realizes that they're not criminals, but in fact victims? Sharifa, why don't victims speak up and tell police that they need help? Moving to your experience, could you tell us a bit about what held you back from speaking out?
Oh, trust and and no one took an interest. No one cared. Like, why should I open my mouth? Like I did, for what? I mean, what are you gonna do for me but lock me up? So mainly that, and of course, my trafficker, that goes without saying. But no one was looking. Nobody, in terms of the system, the cops, lawyers, even right down to the person that comes down when you're locked up right before court and they ask you your demographics. You know what I'm saying? Like if someone had some kind of education or I mean mainly the care. Well, I mean there's no services or no 440, no none of that. But just to be able to see that I'm a victim, what I'm saying? I'm beat up. Like, you think, you know what I'm saying? Like, ask me, give me some help. I would have reached out. Trust me. I would have just take the faith because anything would have been better than what I was living through. So I didn't know there was help there and no one cared. And, that's just how it was, pretty much.
Thank you so much. We hear you loud and clear. Teresa, would you mind speaking about what held you back from speaking out?
Well, I didn't say I was a prostitute. They told me I was. So my trafficker told me I was. The legal justice system told me I was. Department of Corrections told me I was. So that's who I was. And this is the thing. And when you talk about being a either a felon or an ex-felon or someone that has a slew of misdemeanors, Cherie said that 2 or 3 times a week, and you plead guilty and you walk away. But guess what? That's one more arrest. That's one more conviction that's gonna haunt you. And you know what? Housing. Once you have a conviction for prostitution, you will not find very many homeowners or real estate agents that will give me an apartment, because, and I hate to say it like this, but this is the real part. They just do not want to turn their beautiful home into a whorehouse. And when they see that convicted prostitution, that is what they think. the other part about housing is that they're in the worst neighborhoods. You know, if you are able to find a room somewhere, it's infested with rodents and you're not safe. You know, it's not just housing, but safe housing. And yeah, so I'm sorry, the question was, why didn't I speak out? Nobody wanted to hear. Nobody cared.
Can
And
I,
when I did try to tell somebody, they just slapped me down. No, you have a choice. You're choosing to do this. They don't understand the mindset of what a survivor thinks, that it's an amazing survivor, because that's what you do, you survive it.
Exactly.
If you don't survive it, they find you in a garbage dumpster or a psychiatric hospital, because eventually it takes a toll. I have never ever met a girl out there who was not sexually abused at some point in her childhood. It's amazing
True.
that we're victims as a child, and then we go back to a life where we're continuing being re-victimized, not even knowing that that's happening. You know, I mean, how did in Connecticut, I'm not sure about New York, you know, when someone is arrested, the police blotter. So it says, you know, Teresa arrested for prostitution, to the point of saying how much money she's getting paid. I can't even trust our media. Nobody has that compassion. So where do I go? My trafficker. And
which we're
the thing
hoping,
about being arrested is this is something else that only a survivor can understand. You will pay for that arrest. You'll be starved. The most horrific acts that nobody will do, she'll be faced to do. She'll work for days without sleep. Um, go through all of that. There's nowhere to go, and nobody's looking. Nobody's out. There's no search party. There's no one trying to pull me out of that dark life. They have a seat for me, and it says my name, prostitute.
That's so true. As there's no help. There's who are you gonna cry? You know what I'm saying? And it's true about the arrest, because it's like if I didn't hurry up and get back out, I had to make that quota. You know what I'm saying? I'm getting beaten in the alley and stuff. Who's gonna come? The cops? Hell no. Hell no. They're gonna arrest somebody for hurting me? No, they're gonna take me to jail. It's just terrible, you know. Things are different, thank goodness.
And then being forced to service a police officer who is promising that if I do this, he'll let me go. And guess what? The big joke is he took me to jail anyway.
Anyway.
You can hear them laughing about it as you're being brought into the cell. You hear the cops laughing about how pitiful we looked, how we smell, the things that we do. And those are the ones that are supposed to look out for us.
You know, I mean, you don't even have the spirit to speak up,
Yeah.
you know, for real.
Depleted. Your soul and spirit is so depleted that you wish that someone would just kill you. And
That's
then
why
you try to
I'm sorry, go ahead.
go ahead, sweetheart. No, go.
No, I'm just saying, if you know, and any judge that looks at an addict, that if they look at their record and they see like 5 or 10 soliciting convictions, they not, you know, it's like, why not? Why isn't that person screwed up on drugs? You know what I'm saying? They need to, you know, not hold that against them, you know, in terms of, you know, getting your charges vacated and stuff like that. You know what I'm saying? No matter how much time passed in between your trafficking and your, you know, being thrown into jail because you're so screwed up on drugs that you would have never taken in the first place if it wasn't for your trafficker. You know what I'm saying? Now you're just dealing with the pain, you know, so it's just, you know, when does it end? You know, you know, the least the system can do now is, you know, make this process as easy as possible, you know, by, you know, training the powers that be, you know, make them look at it differently. And, you know, it's just important because we as victims have no power, none, you know, that was taken away from us years ago, you know, and it's true. It takes a village. You know what I'm saying? After you clear that record, what about education? I don't know how to fill out a resume. You know what I'm saying? I don't know how to sit through an interview. Make these services available, not only to, just clear that record, but, really give that person a start. It's so important to
Yeah.
see this through and do better.
Up until 2003, I did not know how to read and write.
Mm.
While incarcerated, my my cellmate, she was a sixth grade teacher, and she was there because of domestic violence, and she took a terrible anyway. She was a sixth grade teacher, and she taught me how to read and write.
And then
Nobody asked.
it's just
Nobody, and
incredible.
one of the things that I think happens is that the mindset of someone who's owned. If you go to the zoo and you'll see um, a little baby elephant, and its leg is tied to the pole. But then years, and it gets bigger and bigger, and it could obviously break away from that chain, but it stays because the mindset has stayed. And I think there are ways that can help. For example, when someone is arrested, who bonds them out? Is it the same person every single time bonding this person out? That might be a reflection to say, especially if it's a sex crime or drugs. Because trust, if he's got drugs on him, the girl is going to hold him when the cops come, and she will go to jail. Something else that happens is that you're in a car and the cops roll up. The police officer says to the buyer, scares him off and says, if I see you here again, I'm going to arrest you. What does he do to me? He calls a paddy wagon.
Hmm.
He lets the buyer go, and I'm the one going to jail. There are many flaws here, many, many flaws, but it really does take just open minds. Because like I just said, look at that, the person who bonds them out. That's pretty easy step to be able to spot that someone's being trafficked.
Sure. It's just taking a look and taking an interest and using some common sense and stop like being to the letter of the law. You know what I'm saying? No, look beyond that, because that's a person. And when you give that person a chance and you arm them and you educate them and you know what I'm saying? I'm an EMT. I work with cops. You know what I'm saying? It's like, who would ever knew? You know what I'm saying? That I am a productive member of society. I serve my community. And as for the cops, when they get shot up and beat up, it's me that's scraping them off the ground. You understand? So it's like, it's so weird because I still can't stand them. You know what I'm saying? If you would know the thoughts that go through my head when I'm, dealing with them, I mean, I don't even really think about it because I'm focused on my patients. You know what I'm saying? But it's just an irony. You understand? Like, I'm working with you, and it's like, someone
The,
gave me a
uh,
chance.
the us against them, that's a mentality that stays.
Absolutely. Absolutely. You're so right about that.
And part of Anne Maria talks about the process. I had seen somebody, we had a year or two ago, I went and I was at this, it was a sex trafficking, anti-sex trafficking concert or whatever it was. And a survivor had spoke, and she got up there, and she was doing very well in her life. And I love what she said. She said that 90% of the symptoms of trafficking have gone. It's such a reality. I'd like to think that one day you brush yourself off and you're good. You don't. There's always a piece of you. For me, flashbacks. I'll
Mhm.
smell something. um uh, you know um a car, a truck. I did a lot of truck stops. Or I've driven down the Berlin Turnpike, and there's this one place that horrific things happen, and I go by there, and if my husband's in the car, he knows that is still very much alive for me, and I don't know what has to happen to drive by that motel and not slip into a flashback.
Yeah.
I believe that I can use these things to help someone else.
Right.
But at the end of the day, there's damage that
you can't share with the world and people wouldn't understand. That's how I look at it. Like I have two faces, you know what I'm saying? I know who I am, but not everyone, especially the people that I'm, working around, it would be able to handle the fact of what my history was. They would definitely treat me differently. So, I have to make sure, not to slip, you know what I'm saying, to show that, this is who I am today, but who I was and all those experiences, they make up who I really am. You know what I'm saying? So, um, it's just crazy. We're just very different people and we will always be different people, but good people. I haven't met a bad survivor yet. You know what I'm saying? And they all wind up taking jobs and stuff as caretakers, and it just was such a waste of time, all those arrests and all those convictions and even the time that it took to vacate all of that because I was one of the first cases, so it took a little longer. You know what I'm saying? There's different county, so it's such, you know what I'm saying, it's like what my life is mostly behind me. You know what I'm saying? So I have to make the best of, this is all new for me. You know what I'm saying? So it's just, we can just get a better process, a better law in place, and you know just make it better for the next survivor, coming through. That's the goal for me anyway, to, that this should
None
just
of
be
this
done
will
with,
go in vain.
all of it.
None of this will go in vain if somebody can utilize the wisdom that I have. I can't tell you how many
Right.
times I talk to Anne Marie and I'm like, there's this voice in me that says you are a fraud. If they
Ah,
really knew you. And Anne Marie has been that voice to say, no, 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 because that is there. They told me I'm property. They told me I was garbage, and I came to live it, to prophesize it, to bring it out. Because you know what, I've been programmed, and there's always that voice that if they really knew, you wouldn't be anything.
exactly. It's like, can't slip up. You know what I'm saying? You can't. Yeah, that's so funny because I never realized that feeling. Now I can identify it as that feeling of being a fraud. Yeah, it's true. That's a part of who I am as well.
Mhm. Really, actually, what you've been is hugely manipulated by a trafficker or many traffickers. And you have
Yes.
been seriously wronged by some of our systems, right? That's the reality. It's not about you two being frauds. And actually, when we listen to your story, we can hear the definition of what human trafficking is, which is force, fraud, or coercion. It's all over both of your stories. So there's no question that whether you were victimized as a child or in your adult years, you were trafficked. And that's the point of today. So that as the ones that can make a difference in our state and even around the country, I'm not even sure who's on this call, but those that have the power to create complete vacature of these crimes associated with you that happened because of trafficking. And I really don't care what you were arrested for, it should be relieved completely and wholly. And I also just want to say about this housing situation and just the very first, we hope to change what the experience was for you both, for the new people who will come out of the life, right? That's why the underground exists, and there's so many other providers in the state of Connecticut, and really there is a movement, right? And it's a lot to do with the fact that we keep hearing your voices, right? And because you speak and advocate, we can be informed, learn, and then go do something to change it. Because some of us have
Yes.
great influence, right? You do too. Um, I want to just share quick. A Mirror reported a few years ago that they had 90 referrals to their safe house in the Massachusetts area. Out of the 90, 15 women applied. Out of the 15 that applied, only 3 women were accepted. So there's a balance of 87 women that wanted to leave the life but had no pathway of care. I just want to reiterate, we've got
some
to
of
work
that,
that out.
and some of that was they don't qualify. It's not that they didn't want to go,
Mhm.
but
I
It-
understand that. Mhm.
You know, if someone's on methadone, it is very, very, very difficult to find housing programs that will take somebody on methadone. And like a lot of programs, you know, and I'm not saying that this is the case with Amira, but I think a lot of places, they want the numbers. So what do? They take the people that they really believe have the better chance. And the other 87, oh, well, and it's not a matter they didn't want it, they just did not qualify for it.
Yeah.
So what happens to that other 87?
Mhm. Right, and that's what the underground's trying to address, like independent living or some kind of mode. What to Sharifa's point, teaching survivors to learn how to do life skills first, obviously, help them heal, move into like, hopefully school. We've given loads of scholarships out for, retraining. Anyways, I could go on and on. There's all kinds of things that they need, and, hopefully we'll continue to develop. But I'm not sure Cynthia wants to take it in a new direction, but boy, hearing from both of you are just amazing. And I know there's a lot of questions. I'm not sure if there's last words Cynthia wants to glean from you both, but you're just amazing and we really thank you for your time.
Yes, I do have a couple more questions, but I just can't emphasize how amazing the two of you are and how every single thing that you both just said, we need to be listening to. Our prosecutors need to be listening to. Our public defenders need to be listening to. Law enforcement, judges. We really thank you for sharing that, and we all should be taking a step back and really listening, because your voices are the most important ones in this story, and you are the reason why we're doing this. And you two are helping so many other people by doing this. And we really, really thank you for that. I can't emphasize that enough.
And we just had a survivor in the chat signing off, but saying that I am a survivor and this is so empowering to hear your voices. So thank you. She said, thank you. I had to jump in.
I want to take us back to criminal conviction relief and talking about your experiences with that specifically. Talking about, in Teresa's case, the pardons process, and in Sharifa, your case, the vacatur process. Teresa, you didn't use Connecticut's vacatur process because you weren't eligible. You had 44 convictions, and only some of those were prostitution convictions, as we just heard. So you were forced to apply through the pardons process. Would you mind sharing with us what that was like for you? Because I think that's equally as important to hear as all of those things that you just said.
Well, again, I was told who I was and that I didn't deserve any grace whatsoever. That whatever crumbs they were willing to give me, I would have to beg for. Every single crime that was there, I needed to write first of all, I had to, for each crime that I was convicted, I had to write a couple paragraphs saying where I was, what happened, and why did that play out, and what changed after that. So that's a great question to ask for one. I had to answer 44 of those. And in each one of them, I had to beg for forgiveness. Okay, that includes the prostitutions and the criminal trespass, because that's where the truck stops are. I just want to say this one thing. It's to the point, it's not just our states. I was sold to different, I was on the road, my trafficker sold me to a truck driver, and I stayed in that truck in the cab for 6 months. And when I got out, I went to the police and they said, well, you shouldn't have been there anyway. So, I'm sorry, that just really came from me and I wanted to say that. The question was, what was it? Oh, what did I have to do? So each one of that, and some of those I didn't do. I took a plea bargain. They said, if you take a plea bargain, you leave today. However, it's another conviction. So what do I have to do? I have to write a couple paragraphs about how sorry I am for being a prostitute, or and not having that, and not having said that means I am not sorry for what I did, and I will not get that pardon. So that's part of it. you know, even though I was convicted, doesn't matter if I did it or not, I had to say sorry for it. Even if it was a matter of there was 5 charges and you know they'll drop 3 of them and give you 9 months time and then so on and so on. So I needed to, whether I was guilty or not, beg for forgiveness. The unworthy, okay, it is a shame-based process. They are, and I listen, I had it easy. Everything I'm telling you right now, I had a lot of support. You know, the state's attorney, the underground, DCF. I had a lot of people that had my back. And I truly believe to this day, if it were not for those people, if it weren't for their support, I would not have gotten this pardon. So yes, and then, which originally I got denied. Um, I sent it to them. That it consisted of about 80, 90 pieces of 90 documents. And it might have been a little bit more than that, actually. Thank God we had a fax machine. So yeah, and then I stood up there when it came time. I got denied. So then when you're denied, you have the opportunity to go up. And I went to the pardon, the judges or whoever they are. And I didn't have to bring back all the documents. But the reason I was denied was 2 things. Waterbury, Connecticut told the Board of Pardon and Paroles that because of a prostitution charge and a possession of drug paraphernalia, they would not sign off on me getting a pardon. And for that, I was denied that. So then now I got to go, and then I go to the board and I say blah, 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 blah. So I write all those letters. For each one of those, I've got to write what I did, what happened, where I was. And some of them I don't even remember. So I'm making it up as I go along. Because if it's a drug charge, I know what happened. I'm a drug addict there, you know, but the prostitution ones, those are the ones that hurt. Because those are the ones that were in the newspaper, in the police blotter, to the point of saying how much money did I solicit. That's it, you know. So if it was, she offered to have sexual favors for $20, she offered to do so much, and then was brought into and arrested. So again, it's a shaming process. And that is I had, you know, when I came and I saw it before the board, I had a really, really good friend who just he was there for me. Like I said, it took a lot of people to do this. But, you know, I'm in the midst of, so the pedophile gets up there, I'm sorry, I got help, I did this. And the guy who, you know, killed 3 people, so those are the ones I stood up with. I was one of them. It's very shame-based and it's extensive. And I really believe to this day that they make it so difficult because they want you to give up.
That's a good point, because it's true. Some people make things so difficult because they're trying to get you to not contest or not, you know, like just forget about it, you know, go away. I'm so sorry that happened to you. I really am, because I don't think I can live through having to talk about all that trauma 44 times over, you know, and it's just, I'm so sorry that, you know, and of course we're here now, so none of that happens anymore to the next person.
Well, none of this is in vain if one person can be helped.
Exactly.
If one person walks away and says, I am not a prostitute, all of this will change my life, and it has already.
You two are just so incredible, and thank you so much for sharing that, Teresa. Sharifa, could you walk us a bit through your process with vacatur and what that was like and how it maybe differs from Teresa's pardon process?
Well, Well, actually going through the process, I mean, I can say the hardest part for me was, yeah, and it took quite a few visits and meetings with Lee to, put the chronological order of all my traumas and, talking about it. And, going, that part was very hard for me. And but she was very protective of me. And I didn't know what was going to happen after. I just knew things were going to get better, and I had to believe in that process. And you know in, um and also like I had counseling. She made sure that I had someone to talk to. My It took me a while, the whole vacature process in itself. um but I was able to talk to someone who's actually now a colleague of mine, which I never ever would imagine. I thought once it was over, it's over, walk away, never see you goodbye. You know what I'm saying? But and then when you tell the DA, like I still didn't really understand the process. You know what I'm saying? It just was, for the people that didn't have experience or whatever, and if they felt any kind of way towards me, like the DA, because that was the final deciding moment, I guess, when they make their recommendation. It was a little scary for me because I'm like, is this gonna work? Yeah, you know what I'm saying? Because again, it's so drilled into you, like, um, like you're not worthy of it. You know what I'm saying? So it was like a real suspense type thing. Even though I think Lee might have told me, no, actually, no, she didn't. But that was the most nerve-wracking part, is the actual meeting, the end of it. It's gonna be over. I can do what I want in life. You know what I'm saying? But the whole process of it really wasn't that bad because of the caring of the Legal Aid Society, the EIP. So I guess I was lucky in that respect. And people can take a lesson from them. You know what I'm saying? In terms of, and then I have to give them a lot of credit because they wanted to hear from us, like, what can they do better? What can we do? Like, should we offer you a tissue? Should we call you up? Should we, you know what I'm saying? And that really kind of got me through the I'm nobody, I'm crap, I'm just a prostitute, um, that they cared, and they wanted to know more. You
Yeah.
know what I'm saying? So I'm just grateful that I can pass it along and pay it forward for the next person going through this process, because there's a person being trafficked right now for the very first time. So we have to get better at what we're doing, so this process you know could be as painless as possible, even though that's impossible. You know what I'm saying? But better for the next person coming through this. So thank you so much for having me.
Thank
And
you.
thank you so much to
And that,
Lee and all of them.
yes, all of you here today are doing such amazing work, and we really thank you for that. And you kind of lead me into my next question. We in Connecticut here have this opportunity to become a leader, right? We could pass this legislation, and we would encourage other states like New York to look at legislation like this. And survivors, wherever they're from, wherever they have convictions, they should be able to, at the very least, ask the court for relief, right? Before we open up for questions, I want to ask both of you, Sharitha and Teresa, a question. You were both mentioning that no one had ever asked you what you needed. No one ever asked you if you were okay. You're both survivors now, and you're doing such amazing work mentoring other victims and survivors. We have a big audience here today, and you can answer this question in any way you'd like. Looking back, if somebody had asked you, whether it be a police officer, a prosecutor, your own attorney, a judge, if somebody had asked you what you needed or how they could help, what would you have said? I think I speak for all of us here when I say that we really want to know what would have made a difference to both of you.
I'll let Teresa answer first.
Teresa, I think you're on mute.
Oh,
Okay. I don't think it's really of what they asked. I needed to see action. I needed someone to, instead of taking me to jail, taking me to the emergency room. I needed somebody to, help me get off that corner, or just pick me up and take me somewhere else to start over. It's unimaginable what they said. I needed to see the action. I needed to see, and you can tell when there's a rubber stamp. Thank you. Next case. You can see who's for real and who's not. Um, it's actions. And I think that the legal system fails miserably at that.
That's so true.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Teresa. Sharifa, do you have anything to add there?
Yeah, I mean, I totally agree. If someone had, had said, we can, it's just it's so many different levels, you know what I'm saying? Because, okay, if they said to me, hey, like I'm sitting behind bars or whatever, and I'm beat up, and someone said, hey, are you okay? How can we help you? I mean, I wouldn't even know how to answer that because there's so many different ways, you know what I'm saying? I mean, cleaning my record, that was like, that wasn't even in the picture. But in terms of like, if they offered me a place to, say, hey, you can go here, you want to get away, and then show me, like the action part, that there is a plan in place, because you could take me off the street for the night or a week or two, but where am I going to go? I'm underage. I don't have a job. I don't know where to go. I'm gonna go right back to doing the same thing. So you kind of have to spend some time. Someone would have to take the time to, kind of, really convince me, because remember, you're coming from a place of not trust. Don't trust anyone. So if someone actually really said to me, hey, I can help you, and this is how, um, that would have been different. That would have been good. You know.
I think when it comes to survivors, um, that a lifetime of healing is a lifetime of healing. Um, my sister has been exploited and is continuing the life. Um, she knows when she's ready, I'm here. Um, and that would have helped. I drive by this person probably every day, and I'm always giving them my card. Here, here. Every time I see him, here. I needed someone not to give up on me.
Well,
That's
thank you both so much
Yeah.
for this.
I'm sorry to interrupt, but that was really powerful. And I think that that's an amazing thing to come out of this. And what I found in my work is, Sharifa and Teresa are both right, that in a particular moment, there might not be enough, or there might not be the trust, but to know that there is someone there and to make yourself available to them is really important, so that they do know there is help that they can access.
And even if it's not housing, a meal, you know what I mean? Uh, there was a lot of times that I was at like truck stops and McDonald's, and I would just be sitting there, drinking my cup of water, and someone buy me something to eat. Sometimes it's just that simple.
I'd break down and cry,
Yep.
because it's so true, and to have, someone that cares and that wants to help, and that's, willing to see it through, that you can, yeah, I learned how to trust, I can say, you know, a little
When
bit.
I got out of jail in 2008, I was ready. And all of those people who asked, can I, over the years, one of which was a respite housing, and you get a referral from the emergency room. And there were many times it was for psych, drugs, addictions. Anyway, this guy would always take me into, and every time I'm going to do this and I'm going to do that. And then I'd sleep for a couple hours. I sleep for a couple days, eat, and I was back out. And the day I got out, when everything fell apart that they told me, I went to the emergency room. I asked for him, and there was 4 people and 1 bed, and he gave me that bed, and that got me to a drug program. From there, it got to a sober house, from there here, you know, the fact that I paid bills today is amazing to me. That, you know, I actually have a credit card. Who thought that? It's not one I stole. Um, it really is. And it started with him. He did not give up. And I gave him every reason, but he knew that it was more than me being a prostitute.
And can I just chime in here, gals? I mean, I am just hearing amazing love on the chat. It's weird that love comes through the chat, but somebody just wrote amazing, intelligent, caring, strong, brave, beautiful, mentor, eloquent, determined. So we're going to save the chat so you guys can read this. And I just wanted to chime in. And again, maybe there's no positive side, but people are talking about awareness. I want to get to the statute as well, because people are saying, what's wrong with the Connecticut statute? What needs to be fixed? So I want to address that. So stay tuned. But I just wanted to follow up with you, Sharifa and Teresa, and everybody really. People are talking about training. They're shocked by the stories you're telling about interactions with the police, interaction with the criminal justice system. And they're saying, but there's lots of training. Do you see a change? What do you think should be instituted? And someone even said, what do you think about having social workers work with the police? And I'd love to get everybody's perspective on that. And if you can offer hope, great. But if you're saying not much has changed, I think the audience would love to hear your perspectives. Can we start with Teresa and Sharifa?
I think, I'm not sure what the question is. Do I think what?
Do you think, has anything changed? Like people are pointing to all the training that's going on in terms of making people aware of some of these issues. Have you seen changes? And can you think of things that might help other than what you've already talked about?
I think the wrong people are getting trained. I think the training has to be the police officers, the ambulance, the person asking the triage nurse at the hospital. Those are the ones. And not that the training that's out there is a waste, but I think that social worker that's with those police officers, you know, rather than just writing up the conviction, call or talk to that person and say, okay, she told me this, this, and this. And I remember last time I ever asked, there's questions that aren't being answered or not even being asked.
I have to agree with that. I believe it starts like at the front line, you know, which is your first encounter is law enforcement, then it's the courts, and then, you know, the system and stuff like that. If you think that a social worker will help these cops and teach them how to be trauma informed and you know, how to treat a victim, please, by all means. But I think it needs to start with them. You know, absolutely. So in that respect, even though I've been out of the game for a minute, you know what I'm saying? I talk to people and not to mention, I work with them. You know what I'm saying? Their attitude, you know what I'm saying? Because as I'm an EMT, I've come across domestic violence. I've come across a lot of different things, you know what I'm saying, that I recognize because I was there. You know what I'm saying? I'm also a mandated reporter. So, you know, I have to report certain things to the appropriate authorities. And, you know, so that's just me. I'm a little more sensitive to it. Like I will talk to someone and say, hey, do you need some help? Do you want to get out? I'm really not supposed to, but, you know, I'm just supposed to report. But I
you
think
should be able to. That should be able to,
I should
Sharif.
be able
You
to,
should
but
be able to say that.
my protocol is very strict.
I
You
know.
know what I'm saying? I'm not allowed to do that. I'm not allowed to question. You know what I'm saying? So I'm just supposed to report. You know what I'm saying? But you know, I shouldn't even say it, but listen, I have asked, you know what I'm saying, you know, to let someone know, hey, listen, there's a way out, you know what I'm saying? Just, you know what I'm saying? It's just also putting the information out there, because the victims that are coming through are getting arrested for the first time. If they don't know, so someone needs to be there, whether it's the cops or whatever, to say, hey, listen, you know, we realize that, you know, whatever your reasons are, maybe you're not ready to open up, you know what I'm saying, or whatever the case is, but here's a pamphlet, or here is something in the courts, you know what, when you're waiting for, you know, when you're locked up, you know, and you're waiting to see the judge or whatever, you know what I'm saying, that there's information out there, because if you don't know, or someone doesn't ask you, you know, to say, hey, but you know what I'm saying, that caring person or whatever, you won't know, you know what I'm saying. So it's most, you know, information is very important. and let whoever to get that social worker.
And Lee,
Right.
I wondered if you wanted to jump in there. Like, are you seeing any changes from your perspective as a lawyer working within the system?
Yes, I mean, so the short answer is things are better, but they could be a lot better. Police officers are being trained, but they're being trained to know that there's trafficking. But at least from the feedback that I've gotten from clients, they aren't being trained on trauma-informed interviewing. I had a client tell me once that while she was literally being fingerprinted, the arresting officer was like, "So, do you have a pimp? Are you being trafficked?" No.
Oh
That's
my
ridiculous.
gosh.
Like, why would you think anyone would confide in you in that scenario, right? So we need a better level of training. I love the idea of social workers like working on officers and getting them to figure out how to be more caring and
Right along.
sensitive. And we have specialized courts in New York, and they're not the perfect answer, but what they've done two things. They have provided services to clients who want them, which doesn't solve all their problems, but connects them to someone, just in the way that Teresa was describing, that they can turn to when they're ready. And they have also dramatically reduced the prostitution convictions that people face, because if people engage in services, they get their cases dismissed rather than having a conviction that would later, have to be vacated. So that is a big improvement. So, the next step is to figure out a way to make sure that victims are not being arrested to start with. And that's, I think that's going to be a long road.
Because of the cops. It's terrible.
Yeah, and prosecutors need to, there are certain prosecutors who are trained to prosecute trafficking. And so they recognize the signs, but then there are a whole host of other prosecutors who aren't trained to recognize trafficking, aren't sensitive to it. And so in the work that my team does, we are constantly bumping up against prosecutors who don't know what trafficking is and don't really care. And so that's a battle as well, is getting people globally kind of interested and sensitive. And then the last thing that I'll say is there is great training going on for medical professionals, and the service providers that I work with, tell me that they are getting increased referrals from hospitals and medical professionals rather than getting referrals from the court. So that's obviously an improvement in how people are being identified. We don't want them to be identified through their arrest and their prosecution for criminal offenses.
Some
Yeah, I
of the
think that's-
problem here is too, is that, like, for example, truck stops. Now she gets arrested in a different state. So now it's not about just getting one, it's about getting those as well.
So
That's a
convictions, I
challenge.
think that's an incredible point, Teresa, right? That many survivors face convictions in other states. And so while we're hoping Connecticut will be a leader and New York will be a leader, this is an issue that every state needs to look at, because traffickers move their victims, right? And they're going to face charges across the board.
That's the new age traffickers, when they just go from state to state to state, and yeah, that's a good point.
Yeah, and I just want to highlight, so it's not just training, but it's who are we training? What are we training? That's really important. What is the specifics of the training? And I think it does raise really interesting questions about specialization. So when you're dealing with police, when you're dealing with EMT, when you're dealing with prosecutors, should there be people that are specially trained to sort of take on some of those cases? So great. Can I ask one more question? And Cindy, you should really jump in, but Jill, questions about, wait a second, we're talking about drafting errors in the 2016 statute in Connecticut. Has anything changed, and what needs to be changed? But also, yeah, I mean, maybe we'll start there. What does it look like now on the ground? And also, what are the proposals? How much would the proposals cover? Folks are saying, would it be A and B felonies? What are we looking at if we're going to change? What would the changes be, and how expansive would it be?
Great. So in 2016, the intent was to do what we've been discussing today, which was expand Connecticut's current vacature statute, which only applied to prostitution, to include other related crimes. But the way it was drafted, it actually doesn't give the court discretion. So no one's pushed back on it, but this is an attempt to clean up that language. Where the process is right now is the bill is being drafted and then would have a public hearing. So I can't say to folks definitively what the end result will look like, but there are some of us, including myself, who would like to see the language start with the inclusion of all crimes, A and B felonies, because there is that court discretion. And so I'd rather have it include all crimes so that the discussion can take place about any crimes related to victimization versus limiting it off the bat and not giving survivors the opportunity to have their records cleared. So that's where I hope the conversation begins, and then we'll see what conversation takes place in the Judiciary Committee, because that's the committee it will go to.
Yeah, and I think looking at this issue, it's tough to see A and B felonies, the more serious generally ones, excluded from what people can just ask. Because I think the point is survivors are simply asking. The judge can deny it at any point. No one is saying this is automatic. And we all have heard how difficult it is to bring these cases. But, even if A and B are excluded, and I agree with the push to make it as expansive as possible, Connecticut would still be a leader in terms of the range of convictions that are covered. So either way, we are hoping something goes through, but I just wanted to totally support Jillian. And just last sort of very specific question, and Lee, you might want to address this as well, is what would the burden of proof be? And I'm happy to talk about it too, but somebody said, like, one of the questions was, what do you have to show? And maybe connected to that. So under the statute, what do you have to show? Is there a burden of proof? And then somebody even asked this really thought-provoking question: how does the knowledge of trafficking somebody at sentencing? Like, is it a mitigating factor? Does it automatically decrease your sentence? So how does that work? Sorry if that's too many questions in one, but what is yeah, and how does it work now without the current statute? Sorry, Lee.
So in New York, the burden is the preponderance of the evidence, which is on the survivor to make that burden. The New York law does specifically provide that the sworn statement of a survivor, if it makes out the legal definition of trafficking and makes the nexus to the commission of the crime to the trafficking, that is sufficient evidence to move forward with a motion. And other evidence can be, if the trafficker was prosecuted, if there are medical records connected to injuries that someone might have sustained. It could be just about anything that you can think of. But I have done many motions based solely on the sworn statement of my clients, because it's difficult to gather things from 5-10 years ago. People are, who are trafficked are often not allowed to get medical attention. They're not saving records of anything. So it is important that a trafficker's word is believed and is sufficient to meet that burden. Can you remind me the other questions? I knew I was.
Yeah, I mean, Jillian, do you want to make any other points to that specific point? And then I swear I'll remind you of the other question, which was only somewhat related.
So to the burden of proof question, the legislation currently doesn't address it. And in I believe, unless Sheila, you could correct me if I'm wrong, but in the previous conversation we all held, there was compelling information presented from the other speakers that it's unnecessary. And so again, leaving it up to the judge and the court to decide based on the information presented from the survivor.
Yeah, and I think what came out of that previous panel, and check it out if you're interested, is this: a chief state's attorney said, a trafficking case when we see it, and maybe putting a burden of proof unnecessarily, limits what the judge can think about and how much the judge needs, and that we should leave it to the discretion, especially if we have an active prosecutorial division, right, that is interested in working with advocates. So that I think we were pushing towards maybe leaving that silent, and the statute might actually end up being better so that you're not unnecessarily pointing to what a quintessential or a standard trafficking case could look like, because we know that in the cases are going to vary wildly depending on the specifics. And Lee, I'm so sorry. And then I'll go back to Cindy. The other question was like, and I think this is really important. How does knowledge of trafficking right now under the current system affect sentencing? Because somebody asked, does vacature allow someone to get at something other than conviction? Like if you're serving your sentence, can you attack the conviction? And under the current statute, it says, yes, you can attack the conviction and any related charges. But I'm wondering, I think the question was right now, if someone's in the system, how does knowledge of trafficking affect sentencing in New York or Connecticut? And is it used as a mitigating factor? Or do they automatically decrease sentences? How is it working now?
So, you know, we use it as mitigation typically. In some instances, it can be a defense, but there in New York, I don't think any state currently has a trafficking defense. There are other types of defenses that maybe can be used, but they don't fit perfectly. Like, I mean, trafficking doesn't usually rise to the level of duress. Duress is like a very heavy burden to sustain. And, you know, just side note, I think my first trial, I like, as I reflect back on what I've learned, I think my first trial, my client was a trafficking victim and I used a duress defense. She was carrying a weapon for someone else and we lost. So that's, I mean, that was painful then, and it's painful to think about now. So you know, if you've got a prosecutor who understands trafficking and you have a pretty compelling case, it could lead a prosecutor to dismiss the case. But realistically, right now, it's more mitigation, where we use that information to get a lesser, you know, to get a non-jail sentence, to get a reduced charge as opposed to maybe a felony conviction. That's how we use this.
And if I can just chime in here, I think what Teresa and Sharifa, you were saying loud and clear is that this information is not coming out. That is part of the problem, is this information is not coming out until after the fact, which is why we need vacature so badly, because the actors in the criminal justice system don't know. Women are not speaking up. Young boys are not speaking up. Men who are victims are not speaking up for all the reasons we discussed. But I also wanted to say that, I mean, this is the shocking thing in Connecticut. Jillian, you might be able to talk to this. There is now a proposal to allow a child to make an affirmative defense of I'm a victim of trafficking in order to defeat charges of trafficking in Connecticut. So that is the absolute baby step that we're at. That is not law right now. And there is a proposal to allow a child being charged with trafficking. Listen to what I'm saying. The law is now going to be hopefully changed to allow them to say, my defense is I was a trafficking victim, because currently in the law for a child, that is not available. So I just think that highlights Lee's point.
And the backstory on that policy is that in our state, these child victims haven't been able to receive services because there's a fear that they would get charged with crimes before the trafficking can be proved. And so now this will allow them to start that healing process sooner than later, which is what I believe we all want. So
that point kind of leads into my next question that I kind of want to pose to Anne Marie. Is we had a question about therapy, and I know we've talked a lot about why is this necessary for survivors of trafficking to have things like vacature and just access to basic services in order to start that emotional healing?
Because what we find is that when people leave the life and they're trying to start a new one, if they have to worry about, you know, food, clothing, shelter, just daily needs, and there's not some kind of pathway of care for them to step into, what they're likely going to do is continue to sell themselves in order to survive, right? And so what we're trying to, it's why services are so important. I noticed somebody in the chat room said, I'd like to see a list of what we have to offer in Connecticut, and we can give that to Sheila and Cynthia so that she can send it off to this group. But without having all those things met for survivors, it's hard for them. They're not going to rest. They're not going to rest. And rest is the first step, right? And knowing that you're safe, both of those things, first parts of a journey to freedom. And people they can rely on that are consistently showing up to Lee's point, and that really do genuinely care, right? When they have that sense of safety and a net around them, they tend to do some pretty remarkable things. And I have seen women like Teresa. When we met her 8 years ago, um, there were still more steps she had to take in her sobriety, even, and just some of the things that she was experiencing. Those flashbacks are real that she talks about even today. I'm sure Sharifa has the same thing going on. She just explained that even even in her work on an average day, she might be triggered by, law enforcement. So that's a continuum. Without having their needs met, they can't unravel that. And it's a very complex trauma. It's trauma on top of trauma on top of trauma, right? One rape, we hear this from the Department of Children and Family, one rape is very traumatic to a woman or even a man. Imagine thousands, right? Thousands of times experiencing this. And that road to freedom, it's a long one. It's a long haul ministry. And we, as if we're going to be responsible in this work, it's essential that we provide that place of safety and a place where they can rest, and then offer them some really good therapeutic services that are trauma informed, but also geared toward human trafficking, because it is kind of its own path. It is kind of its own path. Doesn't really fit in the domestic violence homes. Yeah, that's why I appreciate that there's a few transitional homes in Connecticut. There's a mentoring program. There's a couple of outreaches with Siri and Bloom. Yeah, so then because they're very much just about trafficking. I don't know if that answered your question.
That did. Thank you very much for that. We don't have much time left, but before I say a few things, I want to give everyone a chance to say their final thoughts. If you would like to say any final thoughts. And I also recognize that we have had some survivors in the chat sharing a bit of their story. So we want to mention the hotline number. We could put that in the chat if anyone is struggling. I think Sheila will put that in the chat, and needs anything, you can call that hotline and they can help direct you to appropriate services. But we could start with Anne Marie, if you have any closing thoughts, and then we could just move around to each person.
I just want to thank you again, Sheila, Cynthia, and certainly Representative Gilchrist, for everything that you continue to do to move this agenda in our state, this new expansion. I know we've tried it before, and I'm hoping this time the stakeholders will rally and we'll see it succeed. We certainly will advocate for it. But this is an incredible day for people who have been exploited in this way, because should a complete vacature be an option for them, that will give them access to housing when they're ready to live independently, to work, to anything they want to do. The sky would be the limit to have that kind of freedom. So really, thank you. You ladies are wonderful. And then to Teresa and Sharifa, what a remarkable job you did in helping us stand in your shoes for just a little bit. We are grateful to your stories and the willingness that you had to share. You're so brave. You're change agents, and we're praying for victory around this stuff. And I'm thinking we're going to get it soon. So good group of people today. Just grateful that I'm here. Thank you.
This is a power team right here.
Mm.
This is a dream team. We can make it happen.
Absolutely.
Jillian, do you have anything to add?
Thank you again for hosting this and having this important conversation, and Anne Marie for your kind words and for the work you do, working with and giving strength to women. And to Sharifa and Teresa, the best policy comes from hearing and learning from folks most impacted. And so we do this work because of you. So thank you for sharing your stories.
Lee?
I echo everyone's thanks, and I meant to do this at the beginning, but I want to recognize how important it is to me that Sharif and I have been on a journey from attorney-client to colleague, and it's just so amazing for me to see her in this setting, advocating, speaking for herself, and being a true warrior and an advocate is, you know, about as rewarding as it gets. So thank you, Sharifa. And thank you, Teresa, which is hard to say those two names together. I don't know if anyone else noticed that.
I just, you know, I know that something happened with my video, but I just wanted to say that, you know, there was 100+ people here, and I am certain that there are many who can move mountains in this issue. And you know, these women right here, most compassionate women I have ever met. I remember when I met Jillian, I'm like, whoa, she's a badass, you know, and she is a warrior. And I see her and she's taught me so much. And again, Cynthia, amazing. I thought you were a professor. I had no idea. I thought that. But you know, Anne-Marie's had my back. And you know, Sharif, we got this. We are going to take this until our dying day. And I'm just honored to be here next to you.
Ditto. I definitely feel the same. It's like kindred spirits, and you know,
Absolutely.
I'm just I'm grateful to be here, and I'm grateful, to have hope. Things aren't perfect. We've come a long way. Things are definitely better than when I was coming up, and I have hope and faith. That with with people like us, and things are, we'll get there. This will happen eventually. And as to Lee, I love you very much, and you've taught me so much. Not only did you help change my life, but as growing as a woman, kind of, you helped me out there too. So I appreciate you, and I love you.
Well, thank you so much to all of you. And I hate to say anything after that, such a beautiful message, but I know we had some people drop off, but we still have 100 people here today listening to you, Sharifa, and you, Teresa, why we're here today. And we are asked all the time at the end of our trainings, what can I do to help? How can I help survivors of trafficking? And I think you heard today what the answer is. We can engage in the democratic process, and we can push for vacatur. We can push for complete vacatur in Connecticut, in New York, wherever you're from. And we can engage in this democratic process. We can call our legislators, we can write letters, we can send emails, we can do something, and we can help trafficking survivors move on from their victimization. Do it for Sharifa, do it for Teresa. We really can make a difference. And if all 100 of us show our legislators that we need to do something, they're listening to us. We need to do this for all of the survivors. Absolutely. To move on. So I thank you both from the bottom of my heart for being here. It's truly an honor to know both of you, Sharifa and Teresa. You are the reason why we are doing what we do, and we thank you from the bottom of our hearts.
Likewise.